Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is absolutely mind-bending and, honestly, a little terrifying: human genetic modification. We're literally standing right on the edge of a brand new era. We're talking about shifting from a world where medicine just fixes what's broken to a reality where biotechnology lets us fundamentally engineer the human race. It's wild. We're going to look at the absolute bleeding edge of the science, the intense ethical battles happening right now, and the real-world fallout that's already underway. So you might be asking, just how close are we to actually engineering ourselves? Well, a lot closer than you probably think.
To really get why this matters, we don't even have to look into some distant sci-fi future. We just need to look at what's happening today. Take a listen to this. There's an observation from a therapist who's actually treating the first generation of what you could call designer babies. These are teenagers whose embryos were literally handpicked for optimal traits using donor genetics. And the psychological reality they are dealing with right now is just devastating. The therapist noted that the parents, who are often super-driven, highly successful people, tend to treat these kids almost like a startup project rather than, a human being. So when the kid doesn't perfectly match up to that genetic expectation, or if unexpected psychiatric issues pop up from the donor side, they're viewed through this incredibly traumatic lens. The parents literally think, well, your donor's nuts, so you must be too. It's an absolute psychological disaster, and it's born entirely from this obsession with trying to control biology.
And the wild thing is, the technology is moving way faster than our ability to emotionally or socially process it. Right now, things like polygenic embryo screening are hitting the open market. There are companies out there like Orchid offering to screen embryos not just for complex conditions like diabetes or schizophrenia, but also giving you the odds on polygenic traits. We're talking about things like height, intelligence, and get this, they're doing it for about $2,500 an embryo. That doesn't even include the base cost of IVF. Just wrap your head around that for a second. For the price of a cheap used car, we are literally putting a price tag on human characteristics. Oh, and in the United States, this whole process is completely unregulated.
Which brings up a massive, absolutely crucial question. Where exactly do we draw the line between curing a devastating genetic disease and, well, playing God? It's the million-dollar question that researchers, ethicists, and theologians are scrambling to figure out while the science totally outpaces the law.
To unpack that, we really need to look at this vital boundary that legal and bioethical scholars are begging us to respect. So on one side, you have genetic therapy. This is the medical standard we're all totally on board with, right? It's intervening to cure a disease, restoring someone back to a healthy baseline state. But then, on the exact opposite side, you have genetic enhancement. And this is entirely different. This goes way beyond healing. This is about self-improvement for someone who is already perfectly healthy. It's essentially a bid for mastery, a deliberate attempt to boost human abilities like muscle strength or raw cognitive power way past their natural limits.
But here's the kicker. That boundary, that nice, neat theoretical line, it has already been crossed in the real world. You might remember this highly controversial trial where a scientist named Jiankui He actually used the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing tool on human embryos. And his goal was straight-up enhancement. He specifically targeted the CCR5 gene to try and give the embryos a natural resistance to HIV. But it's so important to realize that this wasn't some flawless sci-fi success story. The edit didn't actually work perfectly. Instead of just neatly copying a natural mutation, it triggered random, completely uncharacterized mutations in the DNA. And despite knowing these edits were totally flawed and unpredictable, he went ahead and implanted the embryos anyway. That rogue experiment led to the birth of twin girls, who we know by the pseudonyms Nana and Lulu.
Now, the fallout from this goes so far beyond just those two little girls. What we're talking about here is germline editing. That means these DNA changes aren't just confined to Nana and Lulu. No, these unpredictable, random mutations are now permanent artifacts locked into the human gene pool. They are literally going to be inherited by every single one of their future descendants. It is a completely irreversible alteration of human evolution, and it was done without an ounce of consent from the generations who are going to have to live with the consequences.
And if these technologies actually get perfected and commercialized, the societal fallout is it's terrifying. Molecular biologist Lee Silver out at Princeton paints this deeply disturbing picture of what our economic future might look like. Because, let's be real, these germline and enhancement therapies are going to be astronomically expensive. They definitely won't be available to everyone. Silver argues that over time, society is going to literally split in two. You'll have the gen-rich, this wealthy class carrying synthetic, artificially enhanced genes, and then you'll have the naturals, who are basically left to serve as low-paid laborers. He even goes so far as to suggest that eventually, these classes could become entirely separate species, completely incapable of even reproducing with each other. I mean, just imagine a future where your economic class isn't just about what's in your bank account, but what's literally coded into your DNA.
This whole scenario leads us right to what scholars are calling backdoor eugenics. Now, historically, we know eugenics was a disastrous state-sponsored nightmare with absolutely horrific results, especially when you look back at Nazi Germany. But this new, modern version, this liberal eugenics, wouldn't be forced on us by some authoritarian government. It would sneak in through the back door, driven purely by consumer choice and parental preference. Think about it. If everyone with the cash is suddenly shopping for the exact same ideal genetic traits for their kids, we seriously risk wiping out the very biological diversity that makes our species resilient in the first place, all while permanently ostracizing anyone who's unenhanced or living with disabilities.
Which really forces us to stop and ask another huge question. Does treating human reproduction like browsing a catalog fundamentally turn children into a manufactured commodity? Seriously, if you're dropping $2,500 an embryo just to guarantee your kid is going to be tall and smart, are you still participating in the natural gift of creating life, or are you just shopping?
Because the second parents start using genetic enhancement, the entire dynamic totally shifts. Raising a child basically turns into baby making. The parents essentially become like commissioners, teaming up with a scientist to construct a human being to their exact, rigid specifications. Suddenly, a child is a product, an investment. And if a parent feels entitled to a specific return on that investment because they literally paid for the genetic upgrades, the sheer crushing pressure placed on that kid to fulfill those traits, it completely strips away their individual personhood.
Not surprisingly, this intense drive to control human nature has caught some massive backlash from religious institutions. And if we look at the Christian theological perspective impartially for a second, it's a really interesting dividing line. Many theologians will tell you that genetic therapy is wonderful. It's this beautiful blessing of science that respects human dignity because it heals the sick. But genetic enhancement, that is viewed in a completely different light. Tweaking future generations just to exceed normal human limits is seen as an incredibly arrogant overstep. It's viewed as making radical, unnatural changes that directly contradict the intentions of a creator.
And what's really brilliant about this perspective is how it perfectly highlights the sheer hubris involved here. Honestly, whether you are religious or not, the core argument is super profound. It points out that humans simply do not have enough knowledge about how life is truly woven together, or what the long-term cascading consequences of these genetic tweaks are actually going to be. By germline engineering a child, parents are basically using their own inherently limited reasoning to decide what is ideal for all future offspring. They're essentially wiping out the natural descendants and unfairly forcing their own personal momentary cultural trends onto every single generation that follow them.
But hey, you definitely don't need a religious framework to be deeply worried about all this. And that leads us perfectly right into the secular argument against this whole quest for human perfection. It was famously laid out by the political philosopher Michael Sandel. He poses a brilliant question. In our blind rush to upgrade ourselves, are we completely failing to appreciate the gifted character of human powers?
Sandel basically argues that the absolute deepest problem with genetic enhancement isn't just about safety, or even fairness and the wealth gap, though those are huge. The true danger is that it represents a total bid for mastery and dominion. It is a fundamental rejection of seeing life as a gift. When we try to literally engineer away all of our flaws and perfectly curate our talents, we lose our humility. We actually lose our capacity to love our children unconditionally, precisely because we're trying so hard to control their nature rather than just accepting them for exactly who they are.
And if we let this massive bid for mastery go unchecked, the consequences are incredibly stark. You've got legal scholars and ethicists drawing direct, scary parallels to Aldous Huxley's classic novel, Brave New World. Without some seriously strict regulations, that dystopia isn't just a fiction book anymore, it's literally becoming a roadmap for dehumanization. We could end up creating a society of these perfect designer humans who have completely lost the biological and emotional framework that actually makes us human in the first place. We run the risk of transforming ourselves into beings that are entirely disconnected from any historical standard of humanity.
Which brings us to our final, lingering thought for today. We are no longer waiting around for the future. The genetic revolution is already sitting right here on our doorstep. The actual tools to edit the underlying code of life are in our hands right now. So the ultimate question we have to answer isn't just what diseases we're going to cure. It's this. If we truly have the power to rewrite human nature itself, who are we going to choose to be? It's a massive choice, and it's one we are all going to have to face. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep questioning the science that's shaping our tomorrow. Catch you next time.